Use that ticket. You're on your own. Taking me on a journey without giving me too much direction.
What are you doing with them? They'll be fine.
Dude, you have no idea what you're trying to do. Just like you, it drives me crazy.
I know that tomorrow God will take care of me. I know that that's going to be provided by the grace and mercies that are renewing every day.
Build on that foundation, but that which holds your bricks together is grace.
Welcome back to another episode of Real Stories. I'm your host, Jordan Silvester, and today we've got David Griffith. How's it going, Dave?
Doing really well. Thanks, Jordan.
Awesome, man. So as usual, we usually just jump in, and what's your story, man?
Born in Chatham of an immigrant family. Okay. You can tell, but they were British immigrants, right? So I kind of lived a halfway childhood between an English household and a Canadian household.
Okay.
First 13 years was basically good. In my sort of second 13 years, I'm now 65, so it divides nicely into fifths or 13s, whatever. The challenges of high school, but it was also in the midst of that I discovered a real relationship with Christ. That became the sounding bell for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
By the end of my second 13 years, I was ordained with a Master of Divinity.
Okay.
And that was the schooling part. Then began the career part as a pastor. And I thought, everyone has a dream. I loved your book where you talk about how your dad developed your dream. My dad didn't. He was a medical specialist. He wasn't interested in faith, partly because he rejected my grandfather's faith. Okay. So again, if there's any genetic impartation of spirituality, it was through my grandfather. And so I did 13 years as a pastor, 13-year career as a pastor, then 13 years beginning to go back and forth to Africa.
Okay.
All right. At around the 13-year mark, I was still going back and forth to Africa, but this time I'd kind of settled in Kenya and was trying to begin to establish myself too independently. You understand the value of working in a team, even when the team is your sister and your dad,
yep.
right? But at the same time, I had left behind not just the pastorate, but a first marriage. I left behind, my dog died. There's my country song. My country song is, hey, but at the same time, it opened opportunities that I hadn't considered because it was at 38, 39, that I was saying, God, what am I supposed to do with my whole life?
Right.
And the issue was never really, I've got to have a job to make money to have some sort of success. Because I was, quote, a pastor in St. Clair Beach.
Right.
Nice little place, but at the same time, never felt that I fit in.
Okay. As
a doctor's kid in Chatham, I noticed that a lot of the other doctor's kids, some of whom I went to school with, they were living a ritzier lifestyle. Mm-hmm. We had, seriously, my dad bought the worst cars. But you're a doctor, Dad. Aren't you supposed to drive around something nice? No. If you're old enough, you remember the Plymouth Satellite? It was basically a K car before they really figured it out, right?
Okay.
Coming back to age 39, crisis of career, crisis of identity. But at the same time, to me, it was then that I asked the question you ask in your book, what's the legacy?
Right. Now,
you're a few years older than me when I asked those questions. But since I was 15, I'd asked no longer, who am I? I asked the questions, who am I in Christ? Okay. Not necessarily, how is Christ going to direct me perfectly? Drive right in, he's going to be my no. It was always stumbling into what might be next. And so I do remember at age 38, no career, a little bit of money in the bank, no place to live, did some serious couch surfing, usually with Christian brothers, and nothing to keep me in Canada. Open a newsletter that says, we need a teacher in Uganda.
Wow.
Right? And so I sent away an email. Well, I have a Master of Divinity. I'm fully qualified to address issues with Anglican priests and all that. Nothing. Then I remembered, oh, wait a minute. This newsletter is connected with an organization that I had spent time doing
Right.
weekends. It was actually a Presbyterian organization,
Okay.
but they were renewal. And to me, and again, this is probably the next chapter or the next, is about how the mainline church has become irrelevant.
Okay.
And the church that really is seeking to understand how God wants to move outside of the systems is significant. So again, I'd been removed from a very ecclesiastical system. I use that churchy system, religious system.
Yeah.
But the people who wanted me said, we need you to teach people who are going to be Anglican priests.
Right.
And I said, well, I'm Anglican to the bone, but at the same time, that's not necessarily the identity I want to make.
Right.
But again, I did exploit it. I said, I'm an Anglican priest. I'm legit Anglican priest. You know, that's my identity.
Right.
And that's where it was like a calling card. But at the same time, I realized something in that first time in Uganda. The first 3 months I was there, my assignment was for 3 months, teach for, it was 4 hours a week. So the rest of the time was spent exploring the back villages of Uganda.
Wow.
And I'd make trips into Kampala. I built networks. And what I found there was part of my gifting is a Ugandan term that I picked up, kayungarizi, the guy who can connect, right? A broker. So if you go and sell real estate in Uganda, we will call you kayungarizi. Okay, just so you know.
All right.
And that first trip, God was defining it. It's like, just keep pursuing what you're doing and don't expect everything to be cut and dried.
Right.
So I went twice, so 3 months. This time I stretched it out to 4 months. Still did courses with the same student body, but began to get invitations. Could you speak at my church for the weekend? One of my fellow ones was part of the Presbyterian Church in Uganda, but he was also a professor of theology, and his hope, his vision, was to establish some sort of religious training in really remote areas. We're talking South Sudan in the midst of its conflict with North Sudan. He wanted to do this and this and this. And at the same time, he said, I've got to find places where they're just not teaching anyone.
Right.
And so we talk about it, but it was all talk. I think I might have gone at his invitation to Sudan once.
Okay.
But again, it turned out in God's specific plan that I would be going into Sudan as the sort of first stepping stone out to the wider sense. So anyways, that's the next 13 years.
Okay.
And seriously, that's the one that I want to unpack.
Yep.
But at the same time, at around the next 13-year mark, so anyways, a group came over from Kenya, which was a ministry organization without really a lot of structure.
Okay.
In that sense. So they said, hey, we'll find you a place to stay. Again, I'm couch surfing, but this time I'm doing it in Nairobi, Kenya. Wow. So I went with them and then kept finding opportunities of, I guess, sharing in community. But it's like, it was couch surfing. But God provided the couches that I needed to be in, including, this guy that said, hey, you want to stay with me for a few months, few weeks, few months, whatever. And he'd sleep on his couch and I'd sleep in his bed. It's like, no, this feels awkward because I couldn't pay anything. I had no resources that way.
No income.
But again, it was the grace of God that took me here and here and here. Wow. There was about my third trip over there. This is backtracking. My mom says, all right, for goodness sakes, I'm tired of you hanging around Canada with no purpose. I will pay for one return air flight ticket. So you just use that ticket. You're on your own. By that time, I had no viable source of income. And again, I lived on grace, not faith, grace. So for me, faith is like when you sort of say, oh, Jesus, I've got this need. And, we can discuss more of that in detail. I recognized that God was taking me on a journey without giving me too much direction, right?
Yeah.
And I've always been frustrated because God seems to sort of say, yeah, you're doing fine. That's a fairly good decision. Until 20, I'm not sure. So I'm in downtown Nairobi. Downtown Nairobi has a lot of lunchtime meetings and they're very loud. They find some empty space right? And they just sort of say, we're having meetings here just over the lunch hour, and then people go back to work. So I heard one in this basement, went downstairs, said, oh, this is quite interesting, and met the assistant pastor. The assistant pastor seemed friendly, and so then I met the pastor. This pastor says, I'm doing some meetings next week in the afternoon. Could you? I said, well, I do have a commitment where I have to be on a bus on Sunday afternoon to get up to this little place, like, again, nowhere. But Lucy can help you get to find the right bus stop. And it was crazy. She was like, okay, I'm going to take this Mzungu white man through every back alley because it's the best way. Right? And I'm going, I am not comfortable walking the back alleys, right? She got me, that's your bus. I sort of sat on the bus, and it's like, she teased me later, says, you never thanked me for that. But that started a friendship. The friendship blossomed into a romance. And so my second mission, the next 13 years was about both courting and marrying my wife. At the end of that 13 years, and again, she is much more in tune with the Spirit and how God's directing and says, we need to move back to Canada. I said, okay. So we began to make plans. Now, the challenge for anyone wanting to come back and bringing a Kenyan wife, we were legally married and all that, properly married. But at the same time, the Canadian government says, we don't know if she's, what do you call those? I'm her sugar daddy, right?
Mail order bride.
Mail order bride. Actually, I've seen it several times here, and I'm going, dude, you have no idea what you're trying to do. You're sending thousands of dollars over to this lady in Uganda. She's going to dump. And it's happened 3 times to people here. At any rate, so I said, okay, let's start the process. And at that time, we weren't pregnant. We were trying.
Right.
Then we got pregnant. And it's like, oh my gosh, that's going to affect everything because a pregnant woman after her 36th week cannot travel on an airplane.
Oh.
Right? She'd already made a 3-month visit. That's significant in the sense that it said, yeah, I can live here.
Right.
And I knew she could live here because our last 3 weeks in Canada was in Edmonton in February. It's like, aren't you cold? Yeah, but it's so good here. It's so good. It's like, she'll handle it. But we had to move to Windsor eventually because it is warmer. And again, so we moved back to Canada in 2011, right? 13 years. Yes, 2011. And in that time, we got pregnant. The visa came through quickly. We landed here.
Wow.
As soon as I even before we left, I said, are there midwives in Windsor? Where do we go? There's a midwife just down the street from here. It's over on Walker, right? So I said, look, this is something we do in Canada and check the midwife. I'm so blessed. I honor a woman named Crystal. That's all I know. Right. But she's at midwives in Windsor. She was checking, oh, this is nice. This is nice. Our second visit, she noticed that the pregnancy was not normal.
Oh, okay.
But because she could do it, again, Lucy doesn't have health coverage, right? So she said, I can get you into this, I can get you into an MRI, ultrasound, sorry.
Right.
I should know my medical terms. I'm son of a doctor. But it was a case that, okay, that was God's perfect plan. Even in the midst of the challenge. Right.
Yep.
And at the same time, when we recognized that, we recognized what God was doing. We recognized what needed to happen. We went on a Friday for the MRI. The midwife looked at it. The midwife called us on Monday and said, I need you to come in as soon as you can. She'd gotten all the results. Mm-hmm. She'd made some phone calls to London and said, I can get you in at a monthly clinic for pregnancies that are, I guess, crisis pregnancies. Yep. I don't like using the term.
Sure.
But again, I'll explain the diagnosis for you later because I had to learn about it too. But we got in and there was a panel of experts, a geneticist, a neonatal surgeon, every kind of specialty that would deal with it.
Yeah.
And it was top guns. I'm sorry, Windsor, but it was the London. London really gets all the elite in that sense.
Yep.
But again, it's part of the jealousy. We can do a whole session on how Windsor is cool, and we're unapologetically amazed at Windsor. And so we had this panel, and I was sensing where they were going.
Okay.
Because I'm sort of here. By this time, I'm a little more tuned into subtext and professional speak, jargon, whatever. And I sensed this is so overwhelming for my wife. You know, this is the child she's going to bear, you know. And seriously, you should know there's a lot of pressure on African women to bear children. Right. It really is part of their identity, right? Culture, right? And so we said, I found an empty room and just pulled her in. Somebody else followed in, and I forget what her specialty was, but I could tell by the language that she was proposing abortion. I can't not get emotional here. I have the rage was so contained, but I knew she had to get out of there, and I had to get my wife out of that hospital so we could process it. It was one of those sloppy days in March, and we're driving home from London on the 401. The trucks are splashing us. And I said, I'm getting off the 401. The 401 is not what we need right now. It's like reflecting our own tears. We got off onto Highway 2. If you haven't driven London to Windsor Highway 2 at least once a year, do it. You know, in every season. So we got on Highway 2, and I noticed that she was praying. I knew she was praying.
Right.
She was praying quietly, louder. And then suddenly she's praying, but she's almost laughing. And I'm going, she's laughing with God that we've defeated the devil.
Oh.
And I'm using that term very specifically because it is something that I've understood. If you really want to understand prayer at a different level, hang around an African who prays, right? Okay. And I don't care, east, west, whatever, right? So we went home. We said, okay, this is what's going to happen. We made the arrangements for Josiah. Josiah Thomas. God gave me the name from something that had happened before. So we went up. I was about two or 3 weeks later by cesarean. He was born. The first word he heard from my mouth was hallelujah, because he was breathing. Amen. It was touch and go. We were at Ronald McDonald House for 2 weeks. She was only in for a couple of days. Yep. And God orchestrated everything. Not only that, but we had been staying in one friend's basement, which was kind of cramped. I thought, can we raise a kid here? When along comes a pastor friend we'd met when we visited, and they said, listen, we have this finished basement. It's quite nice. We were thinking of making a B&B, but if you need it,
right,
do it, right? And it was amazing because the pastor and Lucy are the same tribe. They speak the same language. And she happened to find herself an old white guy too, who I think is just retired, and they are developing their ministry. So God bless you, Leah and John Smithies. But it's recognizing too that God was orchestrating these things without us doing,
right,
a lot. I'm working this, I'm gonna, and it's, again, taught me about grace and faith. And it's taught me from the time going. So Jojo was born. I don't want to fast forward it, but Michaela came along 2 years later.
Yep.
Right? And 3 years ago, our niece and nephew, whom we'd known very well in Kenya, moved from Kenya here, and we housed them all.
Wow.
Thank you for selling us that tiny 3-bedroom. It now has 2 teenagers and 2 toddlers. Help me out. So that's what we can do in the next section when we talk. But again, that's where we connected. Right. Jordan and I connected. And it recognizes that I've known him and his dad for 30 years, right? We'll go into that. Never mind. Yep. But again, now that we've got a full household, I'm recognizing that God's grace continues.
Yep.
God's grace is not just earned, merited, or deserved. It's to be celebrated,
Right.
right?
Yep.
So we are going to a church. We have been attending a church that I've known for some time, small church that's grown into big enough for a warehouse.
Yep.
And the name of the church is Grace Ministries.
Yep.
So it's like God has a sense of humor. So I recognize that God is also affirming that, yes, while it's good to be a person of faith, let grace have its way, and the deeper love will emerge. That's my, faith, hope, and love. No, yes.
Faith, hope, and love.
Yeah, I want faith, grace, and love, right?
Yeah.
That's okay. Because grace has been a watchword for me in so many ways, but it's something that I'm looking forward to spending the next 13 years understanding what it really means. So I'm actually in my next 13 years.
There you go.
A couple years in.
Yep.
But again, in the last 2 years, households increased to 4. Everybody is walking and growing in faith. And I'm recognizing that this is going to be an excellent time hanging around with guys that I knew in my 30s, and we're doing that.
Yep.
So just a promo for your father-in-law. He just retired. You need to have him on here. I think he could say something intelligent. But we go swimming together twice a month because our bodies are breaking down, but we need to keep them for our children and grandchildren, right?
Yep.
So it's recognizing that in the next 13 years, God is going to be showing me stuff that I don't regret not learning in my 20s or 30s or 40s. But it's recognizing that God is going to use one generation to speak to another. I mean, there's all sorts of scriptural, one generation calls out to another, right? So that's why I'm glad you've done this. But I want to see if you invite Tanner or one of Tanner's peers or, Mercedes on the net. I don't know if that'd be a good idea. But again, it's recognizing how generations need to speak to each other. Because one of the things that I realized, and I'm sorry, I'm bleeding over into the the real estate part of it. I'm not doing sound bites enough. But anyways, cut that out.
You're good.
So you told me when we were buying, is like, yeah, I've included my kids. It was like, Mercedes was like 12 and Tanner was like 14, 15. Oh, yeah. Mercedes is a spender. I've got a 14-year-old spender. And Tanner, my son, is also a good saver. He knows how to use his money well.
Right.
Again, those are lessons that you can't teach, but it's like you encourage, right? And so at the same time, I'm realizing that as I lived for so many years without a viable source of income, God's grace got me here. God's grace made my family what it is.
Yep.
Right? God's grace is going to continue. And I recognize that it's about God's grace.
That's awesome, man. So I'm rewinding back to the 15-year-old version of you. So there was a conversation you brought up there. So we're past the first 13 years. We're into that teenage window.
Angst.
And you mentioned something about it wasn't your father's relationship with God, but your grandfather's?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's yeah. So I know you want to unpack another 26 years into the future, but right there, what do you think about what that means to you?
So I realized that I had kind of the normal teenage stuff happening. There was a faith foundation, but it wasn't like, and again, I was casual about it, but of the 3 siblings, my brother, sister, and me, I was the one most interested in spiritual things. My grandfather, we always went there for Christmas Eve. The church that he was involved with would send carolers over. I mean, we packed out a living room, and I thought, wow, these people are really lively. I mean, these Christmas carols that I'm so used to, they really sing them with some enthusiasm, right?
Yep.
And it turns out that my uncle, so his son, said, well, would you like to come out to a Wednesday night meeting or something? It's like, oh, these people really love Jesus. This was at 15. I am a more insecure 15-year-old. I'm not big man on camp. I'm not even good enough to be a nerd. I'm just kind of whitewashed. But I said, wow, these people. And I began engaging with them. The friends that I were making all seemed to be Christian. I realized that at my high school, there were other kids who were Christians. Not many.
Right.
But again, it's like, we just didn't talk about it then. You talked about church at church and you talked about school at school sort of thing.
Yeah.
But again, it was in the crisis because at the time, my dad was drinking. At the time, it did threaten his career. Only I look back at that in hindsight. And again, I remember literally a time when I realized that my dad was in no condition to drive home. He'd taken us to a restaurant, but my grandfather was across the road. And I remember that phone call saying, Dad's drunk. Can you get us home? So that was part of the crisis that led me to a deeper understanding of God.
Awesome.
Deeper understanding of what God was doing in my life and could do. And again, that's the question of identity, right? Am I simply the son of a doctor? Am I simply a codependent boy? And alcoholics often relate to that. Am I, whatever it was? I said, no, I need to find my identity in Christ.
Yep.
I know whose image I'm in. I'm
right.
the son of Garen and Ann. I'm the best looking of the three of us, whatever. Right? But image also talks about who do you smile like? Who's walked? I mean, you might have noticed when one of your kids was doing something and they're like 5 years old now. It's just like Corey. Right. Or that's just like me. Right. Or Corey would point out as right? Just like you, it drives me crazy, right? Because and this is a Michaela story. She's 5 years old now, but she will climb anything.
Right. And
the few stories that I've had of my wife's childhood, she got into a lot of climbing adventures, including climbing her grandfather's fruit tree, and he'd come out with a machete. And tease them, say, who's in my tree? Bang it. It was like that. I know he won't hurt us, but it's terrifying. And Michaela's a lot like that too. So I think for the sake of integrity, I better not tell any more stories about Michaela.
Yeah.
Off air, we'll share the stories because Mercedes, when I met her a few times, was like, she's an adventurous. She's the wild savage daughter, but we won't talk about that. So it's recognizing that we are a people. Sorry, I'm an individual who understands my image, who's in a family who not just understands their image, because we are like several colors of the spectrum sort of thing. Yep. But at the same time, it's then what do we understand about our identity? Now, I play the ethnic identity card. I'm Welsh and I'm English. Because I'm Welsh, I sing well and I sing loud. I sing loud enough to be heard at a rugby game, not that I've ever been, right? My wife is of a dominant tribe in Kenya, but she downplays it, right? She'll talk to her sister in her local language, but that's kind of the limit of it, right? And I keep telling her, hey, you're applying, for your resume, you need to put down that you speak this language. Nobody else does. Yeah, but the fact that you know a third language.
Right. Everything helps.
Right?
Yeah.
And then I got an 8-year-old who can count and do songs in Chinese, 4 languages. Wow. But again, that's something you see and you say, I need to nurture that. What can I do to nurture this thing that my 8-year-old finds fun?
Right.
Can I get him to write? Nope. Can I get him to sing songs in Chinese? Yep. Right? There you go. So it's recognizing that we need to identify at a very early age what might be part of their bigger identity without structuring it.
Right. Letting them decide.
Letting them find it. Rather than it's not a will choice. It's an exploration choice.
Right.
Right? So as we give our children the most boundaries that they can to explore, and this is a father duty.
Yep.
Right? A father duty is to allow their children to explore, because we also know that if they get hurt, we've got to answer to our wives.
Well, I think that's the difference. Fathers play versus mothers who are very concerned with what the play is. They're like, what are you doing with them? They'll be fine.
Yeah, they'll be fine. They bounce, right?
So when you jump forward from the 15-year-old, then you're into ministry, going through the schooling, getting that all done. And then, like you said, so you kind of go to the ministry route for 13 years, wander through that. And then like you said, you get your Anglican pastoralship, you're able to teach. Yep. That brings you to your first. Now, how did you first adventure to Africa? Like, what drew you there the first time?
It was a little blurb in this 3-page newsletter.
Okay.
It was like 4 different emails that I sent. And it was the one that said, oh, I'm working through the several weekend seminars for this Presbyterian order. Oh, you're connected with them. Oh, you'll do. Right? So it wasn't about my academic background. It was about
opportunity.
The community that I'd chosen to be with.
Drew you in.
Yes. So in the meantime, since that time, and by the way, at the time I was at a church in Forest Glade, which was Presbyterian. But the Presbyterian church, and I'm getting on my religious rail, Presbyterian Church, United Church, and Anglican Church have all lost relevance because they've watered down what God really intended to build his kingdom. I'll just say that. So at the same time, I was at a Presbyterian church that had to close its doors. Right? But they were charismatic. They were lively. The pastor told me, I joined them to say, well, we need somebody who can do worship. Oh, great. Well, you're young. We also have a lot of youth. Would you like to be involved? The youth at the time was 5 people, 5 kids, right? Including 3 of the pastor's daughters, right?
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, okay, that's it. By the end of a year and a half with them, including, I went off to Africa, but
came back.
It continued. What God did in that 2 and 3 years of ministry said, just lean into what I'm doing and I'll let it happen. Leadership was developed, that kind of thing. And so I sort of said, well, there are these things that it wasn't going to be a paid position. The church itself closed, but the youth had remained. So it was leaving the legacy not in what I was accomplishing, but what they could accomplish.
That was in Forest Glade.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
The church in Forest Glade, but at the same time, I was really involved in a lot of churches, making friends with the pastors, building relationship.
Yep.
So when I left Anglican ministry, I was actually the only Anglican which was called part of the Windsor Evangelical Fellowship, because I was definitely an evangelical, but I was also an Anglican, right? That's who pays my salary. And they had appointed me as the vice chair of that. I'm going, I'm the vice chair of the evangelical. I must be the only Anglican any city that's ever done that, right? And it's about that time I was really working closely with your dad. We had a men's group in that time, which really gave me balance. Which, I mean, you've got to appreciate when you were mid-teenager, your dad and your father-in-law now, and that's ironic.
Yep.
We're meeting together every Wednesday with about 8 or 9 other guys. We were sorting through issues. My issues were probably pretty different than any of the others. But at the same time, we all said, hey, I'm here for you wherever you're at.
Right.
And I think that is the quality stuff that needs to happen today. So anyways, I left Windsor.
Yep.
And I could no longer be the vice chairman of the Evangelical Fellowship because I wasn't a full-time pastor.
Right.
Then I come back to seeing where fellowship is happening among pastors now. It's a completely different dynamic. It is hard for me to define, but at the same time, it is recognizing that there is a greater sense of unity and less of a sense of trying to impress one another.
Right.
Can I say that?
Yep.
Right?
Of course.
And at the same time, I'm looking at the nature of the churches. They're more friendly. They're more,
welcoming,
but welcoming of others. So last night I went to the men's group that my little church has started, and I realized at least 3 of them are in the, I guess, stages of recovery.
Right.
And the guy gave a testimony of he's been in recovery for 3 years, but now the wife of his kids, and this is a total
Yep.
other thing, the wife of his kids has finally realized that she needs to put God at the center of her life.
Wow.
And it's restoring lives.
Yep.
So I think the church is doing a lot more restoring lives. Glengarry, Feeding Windsor, Matthew House for refugees. I could go on, but I'm seeing a Windsor that is so much outside of the church walls and so much responsive, right?
Yeah, we're more missional in the city than we've been.
Thanks.
So you're a missionary who's been overseas.
Yeah, overseas
There's a
and
lot
come
of-
back to realize we
missions
are
here.
missional. And my focus has been with all of these people from other countries, right? Did you know there's an Eritrean church in Windsor? For Eritrea. Eritrea is a tiny little country just north.
Oh.
I met the pastor. Where do they meet? The Mennonite church.
Yep.
And the Mennonites have always been that welcoming, open. And I thought, they're just down the block from where you sold me the house. And it recognizes that in this season, in this time, we can't afford to be nostalgic. Wasn't it great when we went to meetings? Wasn't it great when we go to Promise Keepers and then we'd fill the stadiums? No, that was then.
Right.
But God wants to do something now. Yep. And it's primarily this kind of venue.
Right.
Right?
Relational. One-on-one.
Exactly. Relational, but recognizing that sometimes we need to relate from a distance before we get close.
Yeah. I'm going to jump back into the Sudan. So you were talking about now the Sudan is, I believe, still relatively dangerous to this day.
Still dangerous, but it's like kind of settled danger.
Settled danger?
Settled down. I don't know what.
How long are you?
Okay, let me do some history. Okay, so it would be in 204, 205 that I met someone who said, I've been in contact with some friends in Youth with a Mission.
Okay.
They have a base in northwestern Uganda, but they also are trying to establish a base in southern Sudan in the midst of the turmoil.
Right.
But basically it was whenever North Sudan could afford to fuel the plane and buy 6 bombs, they'd send it around. Boom, boom, boom. It wasn't that drastic.
Okay.
Looking in retrospect, I mean, I could build it up and scare the heck out of you. But at the same time, they said, they need a teacher. Could you go up there? I said, what's it going to take? Well, you have to go get a visa. Then you have to get on the bus. And I did. And it was a shortened week. It was only 3 days. But I said, oh, wait a minute. If I'm going to go through the auspices of YWAM, I'd better do their program. So the most significant and traditional missionary thing that I did in 204 and 5 was to do a 6-month course with YWAM, which is all over the world, by the way. Right?
Yep.
I'm not sure where the nearest base is. They used to have a huge base in Cambridge, but that closed. Anyways, they are a global missions organization. So that gives me that kind of window that there's mission happening all over the world.
Yep.
But then it's also recognizing that each place needs to develop that which is culturally meaningful, culturally significant for them.
Right.
Right?
Yep.
So you can have your team of white guys coming in. Sorry.
Yeah.
I use that
I understand what you mean.
realistically, right?
Yep.
But at the same time, their primary goal should be, what can we do? What can we build?
Right.
Right? I recently heard of a team that goes into Malawi in southern Africa, and they've got some very practical things to do. They've budgeted for it. They do it. And of the team of 4 or 5, one was from there, came to Canada, said, I still have a heart for my home,
Right.
and has built it up. I don't know if it's taken 5 years, 10 years, or whatever. But again, it says that the church in Windsor is becoming centered without. Oh, I can't support this mission because it's not my denomination.
Oh yeah. That's
Right?
long gone.
Get your father-in-law to come here and talk about his mission opportunity.
Yep.
Right? But it's done according to a very specific structure.
Right.
And that's what we need. We do need some structure, but at the same time, it's not like we can say, well, we're going to have a fundraiser for my mission project and people are going to flood in. It's just not going to happen.
Right.
But again, I go back to this, grace. So anyways, grace got me to Sudan. I had enough to pay for this course and met a community that brought me into YWAM, which then introduced me to YWAM in various places in Africa.
Right.
So from there, once I'd completed their training, which took me not only into Sudan on missions, but but into the next country over, Central African Republic, which is like, I could do a whole session on Central African Republic. But at the same time, that just introduced me to sort of saying culturally connected missions. You can't make a church in your image because you still got a lot of Western baggage.
Right.
Or you still got a lot of British baggage. I mean, while the British built their empire, they were bringing Christianity, civilization, and commerce, right?
Yep.
And it was usually Christianity was the third order, right? So it recognizes that God wants to raise up communities of faith that are appropriate culturally. So when they come here, so
Yeah.
I recently met this guy from Eritrea. It's like, okay, you found your faith community, but at the same time, there needs to be necessary adjustments to being Canadian.
Right.
So for the last week, every time I see somebody that's obviously from another country, Happy Canada Day. Is this your first? Oh, wonderful, right?
Yeah.
And we did. We had a great time. My 14-year-old daughter and I went down, saw the fireworks, and this is all part of the package. This is part of the Canadian package. So I recognized, and by the way, Sudanese are very distinct looking. So I've met a few Sudanese in Windsor.
Yep.
And I know what it took to get them there. Because, yes, I would go in and out of Sudan, but it was always for a week. Oh, wait a minute. They've just said, there's some trouble this way.
Yep.
So not only, this is a brief history of South Sudan, not only did I was in northern Uganda when they signed what was called the Comprehensive Peace Agreement, which meant for 6 years, it'll be a 6-year ceasefire so that they'll be able to set up a government, set up the structures. There will be some imposed stuff, and the UN needs to come in and assure peacekeeping and whatnot. But I watched the 6 years. At the end of that 6 years, or close to the end, the one who had really led them out, his last name is Garang, President Garang. He was a unifying force. He was killed in suspicious circumstances. And so his vice president took over. Well, his vice president brought in, or for political reasons, brought in another vice president. They had a civil war.
Wow.
And it's like, Sudan, you're killing yourself, right? But at the same time, I'm also convinced, having seen it in Uganda after Idi Amin and the trouble in Uganda, persecution does build the church.
Right.
There are some powerful churches. On my mission team, the YWAM mission team, there was one pastor from Sudan. I'm going, man, this guy, he can not only speak, he's in his, sometimes the local language. He really, the ministry power was so apparent there. And here we were, it's like, oh, isn't this nice?
Wow.
And so understanding that, like, God wants to raise up people who understand their nature. In the Bible, it talks about Issachar understood their times. Well, we need that Issachar anointing.
So when you're looking at your kids now and you're rewinding, looking back, you're saying, hey, how do we raise up a generation that has that mindset?
Thank you. Right? So I'm reminding them that they're Canadian.
Right.
But it's for them to explore what that means. Right? I'm reminding them of the bigger picture, even as you and I are concerned with how they're being educated.
Yep.
What kind of dangers they face, what kind of outside influences. And by the way, I pity the fool that tries to mess with any of my kids when my wife finds out about it, right? So it is a recognition that that there's that mama bear and a papa bear thing,
right? That
we both can understand, right? Yep. And at the same time, it's sort of saying these are the essentials of family,
right?
But we need to bring it into our culture and the challenges without being paranoid, right?
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So when you look over the 13 years, you have your 13-year cycles. There's many of them now because you're not as young as you once were.
I hope I've got 2 more, but that's pushing it.
And so again, as you look back over life, you can see those moments where the Lord walked with you through the different opportunities, came alongside. And as you've said, a lot of it was lived through grace. You don't talk about it from faith as the primary, but grace is, you're just like, I know that tomorrow God will take care of me. I know that that's going to be provided by the grace and mercies that are renewing every day.
Yeah.
So if you're leaving a last word with the people today about like the youth of today, the vision of if you were at 20 years old and now at 65, if you could have imagined life,
Sure.
it doesn't look anything like what you probably planned.
Yeah.
What would you say to those kids is like the final remarks? Just say, hey guys, I know you might think this, but understand here's the coolest part about what the future can hold.
Faith is the foundation. Build on that foundation. But that which holds your bricks together is grace. And he's giving you enough to build, right?
Yeah.
You've got to bring the bricks. He's got the mortar, to use that image. Come on, a real estate metaphor, right?
There you go.
Right? And again, on that structure, we then create the home, not a house, a home that not only others are welcomed into, but we can establish ourselves as who we are.
That's awesome, man. If people wanted to reach out to you, where would they find you?
Facebook. I've got 2 Facebook pages. One's more African than the other.
Okay.
David Martin Griffith.
Yeah.
And then the other Facebook page is David Mwaki Griffith. So in the David Mwaki, I'm wearing cool sunglasses. And the other one is my firstborn son and I just hanging out together. So I do honor what God's been doing. And I do recognize that God is choosing to build community in a very different way than even when you were growing up.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks so much, Dave, for coming. Right. Hey, guys, thanks again. This has been Other Real Stories with David Griffith. Hopefully have you back on again soon.
Please do.
Thanks.